All right. Hey, good morning, folks. How you doing? Welcome to Saturday. We made it. Congratulations. Oh, how's everybody doing out there? Hopefully there were no tornadoes madness going on last night after that Iowa event, but you never know. This looks pretty rainy out there on the Carolina coast. Looks like Virginia is getting inundated. Lots of rain there, it looks like. The monsoon picking up down there in Phoenix. And the thunderstorms just evaded us last night. I was for sure that we were going to get rain, and I held out, watering, held out, and held out until you just barely see enough to see that it was light outside. And I was like, well, I guess I better go water since there's no rain coming. So the thunderstorms just avoided us. I was disappointed. Could have saved me a lot of time. Hey, good morning, M. Long. You had some bad storms? Is that mess that's in Virginia, did that come over the top of you? Good morning, Walter Davis. You're supposed to get a whole week of rain. Wow, I guess that's, man, where's it coming from? Like, you got this stuff in Indiana and Ohio, but I guess afternoon thunderstorms develop a little differently than weather fronts, though. Those storms tore up a bunch of Lexington. Were they tornadoes, M. Long? Or just some bad wind and thunderstorms and stuff? Any flooding out of that, or has anybody else got anything else going on this week on your radar? Put it in the side chat. We'll go around and roam around today and check stuff out. 70-mile-an-hour winds. Okay, that's pretty significant. That's windy. Some tornadoes, right? Worst was north and south of us here in Danville. Yeah. Did the statues? Wind took down the statues? I don't think that happened, Walter. One tornado. Yeah, as we're talking about that Ohio thing, it's rough how they bounce from place to place and can just totally leave anything untouched, like immediately adjacent to something, just bounce over whole blocks and take out another whole block, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, well, well. I didn't see anything immediately. See which tornadoes do they have. These are from Iowa, it looks like, still. This Missouri Lake boat accident thing is pretty sad. They had a whole family essentially get killed. 9 victims were from the same family out of that deal, and apparently the story came out. Boat captain told him, oh, don't wear your life vest. You're good. Don't worry about it. That's one of the big causes there of all those deaths, apparently. People were just told to disregard. their own safety. That's right, Walter. The South's in your mind. Can't tear it down. It's a state of mind. Yeah, I don't think those statues are going anywhere unless somebody brings in the wrecking crew, and then they can have a discussion about it, I guess. But we've seen what we've happened in several different places. Has that kind of died down for the most part? M Long, I don't know. It wasn't that necessarily. I know we had talked about on the campus nearby you. You said that there was a statue that was under scrutiny last year, but or back in the spring, I guess. But any issues since? It seems like all that stuff's died out. Like the statue issue is like unheard of now, except for like I think there was something in New Orleans, but that stuff's kind of went away. It seems like. I gotta get my coffee going here. Not even. I'm totally not up to speed with my links. I've only got one story, two stories I got ready, but I don't even have them linked in the box. So I've been slacking today, plus starting a little bit late too, I believe. Yeah, slacking. Slacking, I tell you. Hey, good morning, Jet. What's going on? Are you doing any shooting this weekend? Well, I know we talked about with the fire hazard the way it is. Getting on the desert and shooting is not the smartest thing necessarily. Yeah, M Long folks around there might like things the way they are, but there's lots of instigators and infiltrators that want to come and change that, if you know what I mean. I was looking, it's like, what happened to the war in Israel? Like, there was bombings and they were in Gaza yesterday, and like nothing's on the top. Like, there's just this one thing: IDF soldier was killed. I guess that's it. 3 links. I figured it'd be a much bigger deal than that. Um, Locked and Loaded 100% did the breaking news yesterday of the couple of different events that happened back to back. He was having a hard time keeping up, I think, but they made it seem it was pretty imminent that Israel was going to take over Gaza. Supposedly, it looks like Hamas has put out a ceasefire, but there were tank shells fired at a outpost today. I got to remember they're 12 hours ahead of us or whatever. So I guess they've simmered down a little bit today. No reports of Palestinian casualties. First breach of the ceasefire announced by Hamas at midnight following widespread artillery strikes Friday. That's when, yeah, I guess they did an incursion and to take out some rocket locations, and sniper took out a Israeli captain, apparently, is what Justin was reporting yesterday. So I guess we're in a ceasefire as of last night. Looks like the strike after the captain was shot, IDF captain, three Palestinians were Hamas, three Hamas were killed, one Palestinian after that. So it's just back and forth. So they attacked command and control, weaponry, aerial defense, and logistics capabilities. It's like, how do they know all these sites? Like, it's not like they have regular military bases. I'm always confused when they say they do these airstrikes and stuff, and they hit all these command and aerial defense and logistics and etc. Like, always seems suspect. Like, that's some pretty good intel you got on places that are basically like dual purpose in most capacities. Probably, if they're being used by Hamas, they're probably on a day by day, libraries or who knows, I don't know, whatever, butcher shops or something. And by night, they're Hamas headquarters and command and control and etc. But anyway, so that's on and off, hot again, cold again, hot again situation of the Israeli Gaza, West Bank, etc. situation. I did a road trip to Florida last fall, Walter Davis, taking some pictures of all the different monuments you didn't want to because you didn't want them to get taken out, somebody get offended by them. Just because you took pictures, right? That'd have been a good YouTube video because that's the thing about it. I've been talking to Mule about that last year because I mean you're from the north, but everybody's well traveled for the most part. Especially like Mule's been to Kentucky and stuff and traveled around the South, but it's still not well understood the way the Southern people look at the Civil War as the war of Northern aggression and a legitimate invasion of their homeland. Like it, it didn't die in the psyche of the Southern people like it did kind of in the Northern. The Northern people kind of figured they won and moved on. South didn't look at it like that. Doesn't look at it like that. It's a cultural extension, I guess you'd say, and something still taught and remembered. It's not still not considered to be over with because people still feel they were in the right. But anyway, that's why you see so many of those monuments around there, and so many of those monuments were on private property and to a large extent until after history developed, and they were just considered they got turned over to counties, county commissioners, and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff got turned over to the county or the city to maintain after so many years, and they were considered historical landmarks. And now people's intentions have changed, and people wanted to erase history. There's a funny headline for you. Study. Doctor stopped listening to patients after 11 seconds. Your doctor asks you what's wrong. He doesn't get past, the pain step. That's funny. Yeah, Jet's kind of putting a cramp in our style, right? Not being able to get out in the desert and fire it up. Oh yeah, Walter, you talking about the South thing still? Yeah, the actions of Sherman didn't help anybody, and then the bad governance afterwards too didn't help anything either. The forceful reentry project, basically, where you had to basically sign away your sovereignty. Everybody saw what was going on at that time. Did not endure the new union to people, you know. Hey, Slicer G, good morning. How's it going? We're kind of having a chill Saturday. I've only got a couple things pulled up and being lazy and whatnot. But bring anything up if you got anything in the news you're seeing on your end. Let me get to. We were following up on the. Let me get somewhat on track here. We were following up on the Cape Town South, Good Hope, Cape Town State of Good Hope situation all week with the stated expulsion of the South America. Man, I'm having a rough Saturday. South African government from these lands, and I didn't see any news follow up. I haven't seen any stories out of there for the last 24 hours. So it's a news blackout, seems to be, for whatever reason. I don't think anything necessarily provocative has went on, but they're pretty much avoiding the issue that the South Africa was told to get out of Good Hope and by yesterday. So that was like 36 hours ago. Because you got to figure they're almost to Sunday. But this seemed like an interesting article. What to know about the sovereign state of Good Hopes. Thought we'd just touch on this real quick to see if it had any good information, or how it was being looked at and viewed. This comes out of South Africa, it looks like, by the address .co.za, right? I always get confused what AU's Australia, what's New Zealand? NZ? Does New Zealand use NZ? Anyway, what to know about the sovereign state of Good Hope. On Monday, the King informed the president of South Africa that the Cape had seceded. The new country will be known as the Sovereign State of Good Hope and will comprise a large swath of land similar in size to the old Cape province. And we showed the map of that yesterday, and there'll be a map down here, it looks like. The king said he and the Khoisan people had decided to secede from the Republic of South Africa because of the failures of the ANC and their outright theft and communist tendencies. On Tuesday, the king informed the president that the Cape had seceded, and a quiet and peaceful ceremony which took place on Monday. And that was a ceremony secondary to their primary one. They did one back in June. I showed that video link yesterday. Go check out their YouTube page. They've got some videos from back then of them going through the process. So the King Cornelius released a video statement. We showed that the other day, in which he said he had a thorough, oh my goodness. He said he had, through a legal and legitimate process, seceded the traditional lands from the Republic of South Africa. We'll take a closer look at what is behind the new sovereign state of Good Hope. The king said new country would serve as a homeland of the Khoisan people who had rights to the land because they were widely acknowledged as the first residents of what later became South Africa. This new country will be known as the sovereign state of Good Hope. And there's the boundaries. If you got the Cape Town down here, it's fairly substantial in size. While most experts feel that the secession is a cry for attention to fight for the plight of the Khoisan people rather than a legitimate attempt by the king to split the country, but the king himself has taken the secession very seriously. King Cornelius even served Parliament with an eviction notice demanding the property is vacated by Friday. We talked about that the other day. That's what we were really trying to look into. The notice also calls for all South African government officials and employees to leave by Friday, which was yesterday. The decision to secede from the Republic is largely based on what King Cornelius calls multiple and continued failures by the ANC-led government to provide sound leadership to the country. The king pointed out that the government was largely to blame for the economic crisis facing South Africa because of years of systemic and ingrained corruption. They have the same problem we have. Sovereign State of Good Hope website revealed that King Cornelius together with a group of white South Africans come up with the framework for the secession some years ago. And that's what I was talking about the other day. Like, this stuff's been on the back burner and just avoiding, it's been media blackout on the whole issue for a long time. But he did talk about in that video that they were in league with several other tribes and the white South Africaners in their area. So it's a joint effort. So here's the quotes. The plan was simple, that the Khoisan king secedes with the backing of the Afrikaner white European descendants and the coloreds, as they call them. And thus a relationship was born and a new hope was given to the four nations to unite under a new country. The Khoisan have long held the belief that they should hold the rights to the lands which make up the Cape because they were the original inhabitants, and as such they should be afforded the rights, privileges, and respect that comes with being the first people of South Africa. The sovereign state of Good Hope. What is SSGU? Did they have a typo? SSGH. They did have a typo. Proposes its new borders would mirror those in the old Cape province. This means that sovereign state of Good Hope is made up of the Western Cape, Northern Cape, and large parts of the Eastern Cape. King Cornelius is the hereditary leader of the Khoisan people, and according to the SouthAfrican.com, he can trace his bloodline and therefore legitimacy to reign through a long lineage of Khoisan leaders. He is a recognized head of the Khoisan National Royal House. That was the video of them taking down the flag the other day. Took down the South African flag and put up their tribal flag, their flag for the new state of Good Hope. That looked enjoyable. The South African government has as yet not responded to the secession, and by all accounts has decided that the matter is so incredulous that it does not warrant an official response, which can be dangerous for all involved. King Cornelius, on the other hand, has taken the government's silence to mean that it has agreed to the terms of the new country. He also noted that the act of secession is protected by international law. He's got his own entourage and a BMW. So the question the paper's asked, so is the sovereign state of Good Hope real or just a stunt to draw attention to the plight of the Khoisan people? It is a complex and probably a mixture of the two. So as the paper says here, moving on, King Cornelius would obviously dearly love to secede from South Africa, and his people genuinely feel that they deserve more respect and recognition as the first people of South Africa. Deep down, the king must know that his secession will never be allowed to happen, and therefore it's likely that this action is as much about drawing attention to the plight and the cause of the Khoisan people as it is about breaking a country into two. Only time will tell what happens, and they end it like that. That was some deep analysis you got there, paper. Deep analysis. Or not. Um, I think the more significant thing is it's not just the Khoisan people; it's the four different groups getting together to make the join together. That's the more significant part of this. I think that makes it more um, gives it more legs, if you will, or more. Uh, I guess you could just take it more seriously if I was South Africa. Um, but again, there was no news in the last 24 hours on this about what if there's any evictions, if there was any issues with government employees or anything. Hey, good morning, Castaway. How's it going? The capital of South Africa is Pretoria. Is that correct, Walter? It's kind of in the middle of the country. I think it's Pretoria. I saw a map that had three different stars on it, and I think they were considered the provincial capitals. And then there was the central capital, and I think it's Pretoria. But let's look. Let me look it up. I'm pretty sure it's not in that area, but they have government officials everywhere. There was talk about a lot of their while we're talking about the map. Um, a lot of South Africa people, this Khoisan tribe living north in that country on the left border there is Nambia. Let me pull this. Um, oh goodness, I just wanted a map, not a. Is Johannesburg the capital? The Johannesburg sounds right. Johannesburg South, and Johannesburg is on the far east part of the country. Trying to pull this up on another screen for you to bring it over. Okay, let's get. I can't. It's funny. I get maps, and Pretoria and Johannesburg are nearby each other, and they both are given different significance of with their um, icon they have. All right, I love maps. Um, so here's Johannesburg and Pretoria up here. Shows Pretoria as a national capital. It would appear. It says national capital with the star in a circle, but it also has Cape Town. These are in the provinces, I believe, with the that doesn't make sense. Provincial capitals are supposed to be circled with the dot. I think they messed their own map up. Well, that's not a very good. Well, there's one. Oh, here it is. Capital, Pretoria Administrative, Cape Town Legislative, and Bloemfontein Judicial. So their actual capitals spread out against. That's a good way to spread your influence is put all your different functions of government in different capitals. So they've declared the capitals to be in all these different places. That is interesting. That is very interesting. So I guess in particular, that's what that notice was for, was to get those legislative. And then we said an issue to Parliament because Parliament meets in Cape Town. Interesting. Interesting way to break up your government. So where was that on that question? Where are we at? Where is the capital? So there you go, Walter. It's all over. The capital's in 3 different places. So yeah, Cape Town down here on the coast, Bloemfontein, whatever you say that. That's the judicial capital, and Pretoria is actually the administrative capital in the top northeast. So a different. If you want to talk about separation of government powers, that's one way to do it. Get them all out of the same city. Imagine we had the Supreme Court in Kansas City, put the Congress in, let's say, San Francisco, and the president stays in Washington. That would be a interesting way to break it down. Hey, good morning, 5150, the Bob. What is going on? Sorry I didn't make your blog talk radio the other day. I am ashamed. I definitely got sidetracked and busy that at that time. Right, M. Long, you're talking about that a couple of chats ago about the horse farms bringing South Africans over. We were talking yesterday about Russia was bringing in 15,000 South African farmers, Boers, to escape their genocide, essentially. What's the what for, Bob? What was that exclamation point? What for? I'm not sure what your question's about. That was a long time ago. That was several minutes ago, actually. I'm way behind there. Has the AM Long, has the news ran any stories about those farmers bringing those people over? That would be a good news story if somebody would actually take the time to do it. A good YouTuber like yourself, you could go over and do an interview and get the lowdown, right? Since nobody else will cover it. Walter Davis, that's an excellent idea. Put all government officials in horrible places to make the politicians as miserable as they make us. So we'll put Congress in Death Valley. I guess we could just put them all there together. The desert Southwest is probably the best location for them, but I guess maybe we put one in South Mississippi somewhere in the swamps or something to go through that misery, have to fight off the gators and stuff. And we could divide them up somehow, and then have one like the Northern Rockies of Montana, so they could enjoy the winter. M. Long, your wife is from South Africa? Oh, Bob, you're just not hearing about the South Africa thing. Yeah, we've been covering it for about for the good portion of the week since Wednesday, I guess. I did a couple different videos on it, but yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere with this secession thing. But we've been covering the land grab issue for a long time, and that's why what drove a lot of this is the tribes don't want their lands taken by the government, and they're like, yeah, we'll just cut you off instead. Oh, the farm owner's wife is South African, so they know family back in South Africa, not your wife. Got it. Got it. Yeah, Bob, this is just an extension of the land grab, and really the secession talk by the tribes has been in the works for a good period of time, but it's just been kind of suppressed in the news because as much as I've talked about the land grab stuff and looked at articles and stuff, the stuff about secession has been buried. It's not been as prominent until this popped up the other day. So we were digging down into it and taking a look at it in depth, I guess you would say. No, from Walter, from what I understand, the Boers actually live in this good Good Hope area that this is looking to cover on the eastern side of the country. Uh, it's a high percentage. It's obviously not all of them, but the good percentage of them live on this western side, is what it was explained in a article we looked at Wednesday or yesterday. I can't remember. And I've read a lot of articles that I haven't talked about on here, so but I believe a good portion of them are in that area that is seceding, and or they're going to offer up refugee status to those that don't live in that area. A lot of the reason that area is so open is because it was dedicated to the tribes and was not heavily populated. Let me see. Yeah, looking at some research that a friend of mine was doing too. Maps indicate most Afrikaans live in the Cape area, so that's Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape here. That's where most of them live. Some of the Afrikaans live in Nambia as well. So there's lines of communication right there and like kinship, if you will, or whatnot. So I guess that would make go back to your statement there, Walter. Isn't the Northeast where the Boers are getting beat up? I guess if there's any out there, they're probably in a severe minority. That would make sense that they're probably getting the bad end of the deal for sure. Hey, good morning, JJ. How you doing? Thanks for checking in. The split is the farmers and the natives, Bob. And that's one thing that was interesting about the statement by the tribal nation there. They've come into agreement with two other tribes and the Boer Afrikaans whites as well to form that secession agreement, I guess you would say, however you want to say it. Yeah, we're trying to, JJ. We're kind of just piddling along. What do you want to talk about? I do have one other article to bring up here. I didn't see it as a hot and heavy type of day. So this other article posted on the G Plus by Christine, the water wars of Arizona. So of course this take our attention. You know, we've been talking about water shortages around the world and everything else and all the issues. So anything close to home is worth looking into. So the title, The Water Wars of Arizona, attracted by lax regulations, industrial agriculture has descended on a remote valley, depleting its aquifer, leaving many residents with no water at all. I've never known, how does Arizona have lax regulations? Don't they have, with your water right on a certain acre foot issue? when they do that, that's kind of interesting. How lax could it be? How much different could it be from Nevada? Because your water right only grants you so many acre feet usually a year. And if it's surface water, it's usually monitored. Now, if they're just pumping out of a well, that's usually it's usually a statute of how much you can draw from a well, but it may not be a metered well. So I guess you could cheat technically, but to your own demise. So many acre feet can only support so much land of growth of farming. So this Lori Papu woke up to her new home in July of 2014. Oh goodness, here's a human interest story. They got to start off with this to make you feel for something instead of just getting into it. They moved from Pennsylvania, yada yada yada. It's like they're trying to write a book instead of trying to write the news. This is not creative writing class, people. Like all homes in the valley, there were no reservoirs or rivers. The Pappas house drew its water from a private well drilled into the underlying aquifer. According to the real estate listing, the well reached a depth of more than 300 feet. That's a deep well. Apparently, she had sand in the water and ignored it. Okay, and took a note to look into it. So a few days later, after they moved, we're doing laundry. The washing machine stopped filling with water. Okay, they're having water issues. So they had sand infiltration in their water. A local driller arrived at the inspection a short while later. The well was a 5 horsepower pump, an 8-inch wide borehole, and a screen to filter dirt and rock from the aquifer's water. The well appeared to be in good working order, the driller explained, capable of pumping 25 gallons a minute, enough to supply a home many times larger than theirs. The stoppages and intrusions of sand, the driller said, in all likelihood signaled that the water level had begun dipping below the mouth of the pipe, causing the pump to act as a vacuum. The problem wasn't the well, in other words, it was the aquifer, which had retreated below where the well could reach it. And that was 2014. So over the next few weeks, they asked around their neighbors. The neighbors having similar problems. 100 families from across the valley had failing or drying wells. A regularly scheduled meeting of state representatives turned into a de facto emergency water meeting at the Chamber of Commerce. And the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources drove up from Phoenix for the meeting, yada, yada. So they're, okay, this is some old standing news. Let's get to it. Come on, people. They want to know nobody reads the news anymore because they don't know how to write about the point at hand. They make it a human interest story instead of writing about the issue. So stretching outward from the downtown Wilcox, the hub of the valley, lay a sprawling latticework of recently cultivated farms and nut orchards. Local farmers had watched over the last decade and a half as waves of industrial farms arrived, tilling so much land that dust storms began. Enormous corporations were descending on the valley for the same reason homesteaders had: their year-round growing season and lax regulation. Still, how are they able to pump unlimited water? That doesn't make sense. Compared with those for rivers and lakes, few laws govern the extraction of groundwater. Aquifers around the globe are being quietly dried up as the compound strain of increased food production in a 2-decade stretch that now includes the 10 warmest years in recorded history. Wow. Residents accuse farmers of sucking the water out from under them, and the state shirking its responsibilities. The Department of Water Resources official argued that the state couldn't put water back into their wells. The only solution was to chase the water downward by deepening their wells a few hundred feet. If you're already 300 feet, you can't go much deeper. This is a $15,000, $30,000 process to improve your well. Wells output dwindled from 100 gallons to 50 a day. The average household in Phoenix, as a note, uses more than 540. Yeah, there's that key number of 50, like we've talked about with the water rationing in Cape Town and other places. That 50 gallons a day number seems to be pretty prevalent. They set up a catchment system. So I want to get to the issue of how these industrial farms are able to pump so much water. So they talk about acre foot of water, 325,851 gallons, half Olympic pool or 50 bushels of corn. That's the comparison. Groundwater is a largely hidden resource, but one that supplies 25 to 40% of global drinking water. Agricultural still uses the bulk of it. About 70% of water withdrawn from aquifers is consumed by one industry, farming. Nearly all the planet's freshwater reserves not stored in polar ice lie in depths below 3,000 feet. That's a big drill. I don't think we're quite to getting that yet. This formed one of the planet's largest waterways, a 6 quintillion gallon supply of ice age rain and snow that is almost entirely uncharted. The geological history, etc. The large aquifers, the Ogallala Aquifer, the Plain States. If you're not aware of that, that's a pretty interesting read. Vulnerable aquifers of the desert Southwest, and then back to Sulphur Springs, Arizona. Oh my goodness. In the 1990s, during the first few years of what would eventually turn out to be a 19-year and accounting Arizona drought, only about 15,000 acre-feet of water were estimated to have percolated into the aquifer each year, while 100,000 are being pumped out. Yeah, this is a problem lots of places. Recharge is a issue with everybody's aquifer. And I know when we had these well discussions a couple of years ago here in Nevada, that was very well tracked, and the water master, he has a big job to track all this stuff, and each of the aquifers is measured and the recharge is measured, etc. While 100,000 were being pumped out as the valley continued to warm through the 2000s, 2010s, estimates for recharge went unrecorded as annual pumping soared to 200,000 acre feet. Yeah, the state's water people are dropping the ball, if you ask me. Once it had been possible for ranchers to develop natural springs into watering holes using only a shovel. Now, after watching water levels drop 100 to 300 feet in 35 years, some farmers wondered how long they could go on. Well, who's pumping more water than they're supposed to get is the question. Anyway, let me check out the side chat. This is a pretty long article that doesn't get anywhere fast. They want you to feel sorry for the farmers, but they're not talking about any issues of who's out pumping the needs. Bob has a fjord. Where it was good morning HGP, good morning J Mac. Yeah, I'm still trying to get my coffee. I'm still off topic here, JJ. Hey, Galenas Vilkas, thanks for joining us. Horses, Dutch farmers, locked and loaded 100%. Hey, shout out. We were talking about you earlier. We looked at the Israel issue real quick. They're saying it died down overnight, but you know how that's going to go. That's probably going to flare back up again before you know it. That's expensive horses them long, 600,000 and up. That's crazy. Right, JJ? Yeah, that's some nobody else seemed to be giving the Boers or any of the white South Africans any type of ability to get a refugee status or visa or anything. There was talk of Australia, and Australia basically turned their nose at them from the last I saw. M. Long states those gals from South Africa can outwork a man. That doesn't make me feel much better. Yeah, Walter, that's a good point. They can put a series of collection ponds and dry wells to feed the aquifer. And that's in Nevada, they recharge aquifers off of snowmelt and the rainfall each year. They have a system set up to recharge certain aquifers in certain areas because we're all so many different basins across Nevada. And that I didn't know this without listening when they were talking about the metering wells issue back a couple of years ago. But the state water master goes into recharge, and they have recharge plans for some of the more used basins and et cetera that diverts surface water from the rivers and whatnot to do that. And he had all the numbers, and that's what's surprising, that a state like Arizona would let it get this out of hand, that the state water master, these natural resource guys, didn't know that there was an overdraw for 30 some years running. We had one of the valleys up here has an issue that's been going for about 10 years that was brought up during these metered well meetings, where a lot of these issues started from. And basically that's what it was like. They were trying to, somebody was pushing a statewide issue, but really it was a local issue that they were trying to solve. But some politicians were trying to blow it up out of proportion. And they're like, no, we need our own local water management plan to get through this. And I don't know what's happened since we had the big rain last year and the big snow, but I think they're still on water issues. They haven't solved everything, even with the last couple of years being decent, getting us out of the drought and whatnot, because they have so much draw. There's so much water they're pulling out of the ground. So they were talking about how to manage that within their own little water district, basically. I think it's called Diamond Valley. Um, but it was a group of farmers and everybody, and I guess there's one farmer that wasn't cooperating. They're going to the state like, "Hey, you guys need to help us fix this because you got people out drawing their allocations because well water can only be drawn at a certain amount, and then you have your water rights that you may have purchased, but you can't go beyond that." Um, JJ, you think with all the weather mod they do, they would make it rain more in the Southwest? Well, if the agenda was to help people, you might think that would be true, but I don't know if that's the agenda necessarily. Now, there has been, and this is documented, and there's a lot of history behind this. They have been trying to get more snowfall across the Sierras and Nevada for decades. This goes back to the 60s, um, using the silver oxide or whatever. They've been putting stations across the Sierra for these decades to increase rainfall and snowfall across Nevada for exactly those reasons. And this has been studied. Part of the meteorological team out here and the university. Um, you can look up, I guess, weather modification in the Sierras or um, cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is a big word they use. Cloud seeding over the Sierras, and there's a lot of articles you can look up on that. That's been going on for decades. So weather modification, in the truest sense, has been going on in lots of places for a long time. Now, in the current parlance of the chemical issue, that's a little separate, but they've been trying to figure out ways to get increased rainfall in lots of places in the deserts. Walter Davis says it's all fun and games until the Great Lakes drain into the Detroit salt mines and turn the aquifer to salt water all through the Midwest. I don't even know how that would work, Walter. That sounds dangerous. So there's some geological features there that is that a possibility? Is that like something that's been hypothesized could happen? And that would then transfer water to the aquifer from those salt mines, I guess you're saying? I don't know how that would work, but it doesn't sound fun. Hey, have a good day, Bob. Enjoyed it. Thanks for checking in. Locked and Loaded asked a question, then he goes, not to get off topic. All right. I did see an article that guy was arrested, but I wasn't sure why he was arrested. Was he charged with something? I mean, everybody should have a couple dozen bombs and claymores and everything in your garage, right? But had he threatened somebody? Is that what tipped him off to him? I did see that. Um, I mean, again, everybody should have a huge collection of guns. You need one per type for every family member in the house, plus extra ammo, and you gotta have a couple for any visitors you might have. So you should have a lot of guns. I hate when they blow those stories up, even though this sounds like a nefarious communist. I mean, still, everybody should have their good collect available. Not to get off topic. M. Long emailed Rand Paul. Right on. Linus Vilkus has the idea that Berg for a South African farmer. I like that idea. Yeah, Galenas, that's a solid idea. Going back to Walter Davis's idea, it could happen. Look at the maps, right? But how would the Great Lakes infiltrate these salt mines? I guess would be the how easy would that be to happen? Rick Dees bought all the best farms in your county. They're Imlong 20 years ago. Really? Is that what? And so he owns all those horse farms now, or his estate or whatever. So getting back to the Arizona water issue up here, NASA's studying Jet Propulsion Laboratory, all the different aquifers, talking about Central Valley and the Great Plains. So there's a lot of water history and other stuff in here, and the big aquifer systems of the world they're talking about. In the United States, it is disappearing most rapidly in the rural agricultural belt, extending from Kansas to California. Without ready access to more traditional stores of water, many farmers have been forced to rely more heavily on groundwater, pitting them against local residents watching their wells go dry. In 2014, Tulare County, California, 7,000 people ran out of drinking water. The next year, wells hit a record low of 64% recorded declines nationwide, and 1 in 30 failed in western states. Squeezed by drought and tightening regulations, large farms started to seek out lesser-known pockets of cheap water. In rural Arizona, where there are essentially no groundwater regulations governing irrigation, they found an ideal destination. Wow, I can't believe Arizona would be that far behind the power curve. I think a lot of the things that goes with Nevada's water regulation is the mines use a lot of water, or what they call dewatering. So there's a lot of regulation around mining and groundwater. So maybe Nevada was ahead of Arizona in that respect, was why they track it better. Arizona was particularly attractive to Middle Eastern farmers. A policy of unregulated pumping on the Arabian Peninsula had in 40 years drained aquifers that had taken 20,000 years to form, leaving thousands of acres of fallow and forcing Saudi Arabia and others to outsource much of their agricultural production. And I remember Justin down there at 420 Homestead had talked about this issue a couple years ago. All these South Africa or Middle Eastern farms popping up out there with these Middle Easterners. He didn't know who they were, but you could see them opening up these farms and just pumping whatever they wanted. And I think that's when we were talking about this well issue up here. In 2014, a Saudi Arabian-owned company, the Almari Corporation, bought 10,000 acres in the town of Vicksburg, northwest of Sulphur Springs Valley, planting alfalfa to ship halfway around the world to feed Saudi cattle. Then a United Arab Emirates Farming Corporation, Al Dara, bought several thousand-acre farms along both sides of Arizona-California border. These purchases were perfectly legal, but many residents felt these newcomers were essentially exporting water. At least once, the sheriff's department in Vicksburg deployed 5 deputies to stand guard at a town hall meeting. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't burn them out. Yeah, and I don't think they've changed their laws and their regulations. I don't think they've done anything about this. With less rain and snow reaching the desert floor, overpumping has rendered a semi-renewable resource finite, touching the kind of resource war perhaps more familiar to coal camps and oil boom towns. No, in the West, water's always been worth fighting over in the West. Hydrologists use the phrase groundwater mining to describe situations in which the rate of water withdrawal exceeds the rate of replenishment. For some, the metaphor offers a stark lesson. If we know we're mining the water, let's just say, this is Richard Searle, when I visited his ranch outside Wilcox at 63 Searle Still cuts a frontiersman's profile. Okay, is a cutting horse get past the human interest part of this? Part of the reason groundwater mining is in the valley hadn't forced a reckoning earlier, he said, was the water was ubiquitous to the point of being invisible. Local farmers were never required to put meters on their wells, he pointed out, which meant that nobody knew exactly how much water was being pumped, much less how much was left. Long term, people say we should search for a solution, he said, but they don't want to be the ones that's to suffer. Well, you can also just look at somebody's property. If you know a well is only able to pump, like here in Nevada, it's 2 acre feet. You can only grow so many plants on 2 acre feet of water, or so many animals. Let's say if you're ranching or whatever, there's a limit, and it's just kind of, you can gauge it just by looking at it. You don't even need a meter on somebody's well. If they've got a stand of 50 pine trees and 20 cottonwoods on their property, or say they're growing fields and fields of produce, if they don't have a water right, they're pumping their well. You know, it's pretty self-explanatory in a lot of respects. When the corporate incursion into the valley began in earnest in 2003 or so, local farmers had been mining the aquifer gently for the last 60 years. Even as the amount of irrigated acres more than doubled from around 40 to 100,000, the potential consequences for the valley's water supply weren't yet apparent. I could see acres being planted, said Alan Seitz, who farmed chili peppers and alfalfa for close to 40 years. It just happened over a period of time. It wasn't uncommon to see farmers shifting growing patterns for fallowing acres. New drilling rigs or freshly tilled acreage didn't excite much chatter. What drew Seitz's interest in 2010 or so was the depth to which farmers were drilling. Those of us that had been in the valley growing corn, cotton, alfalfa, we couldn't drill deep wells, he said. The cost made it prohibitive. Then we saw people drilling down 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet. Seitz knew straight away that moneyed operations intended to plant nut trees, which, yeah, almonds and nut trees are one of the biggest. They use more water than anything. There's several stories out of California about that. Over the previous decade, the price per pound for pecans and pistachios had roughly doubled, driven largely by demand from China. But those nuts, like almonds, require an exorbitant amount of water and capital to farm. So they're bringing in a lot of that stuff. There you go. An average orchard could cost more than $20,000 an acre to clear and raise, in part because the trees don't bear nuts for 5 to 12 years. Whew, that's crazy. I thought peach trees and stuff were hard to wait on. During sapling years, trees consume only about 2 acre feet of water a year, but grow to require as much as 6 acre feet when mature, among the highest of any crop. 6 acre feet for one tree? Holy cow. To ensure a consistent supply of water from an aquifer already plummeting deeper every year, farmers often drill a well every 160 acres, each at a depth of at least 1,000 or 1,500 feet. One farming conglomerate expanding from Minnesota drilled 293 wells, some pumping more than 2,000 gallons a minute. Yeah, if they don't regulate that, they're doomed. Goodness, Arizona. Yeah, you can't. That's just madness. So that's a long article. There's a whole slew of historical stuff here and about the nature of farming, and it goes on and on. Do they have a conclusion? Water delivery, trucking it in. So in the final paragraph, in the midst of tensions in Wilcox, the governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, announced the creation of a water conservation committee aimed at groundwater security and reform. Even so, this year, only 2 rural groundwater bills have been introduced in the State House. Each proposed, among other things, to lift regulations in order to make way for a 7,000 home and 28,000 home development, respectively, just outside the Sulphur Springs Valley. And a proposed promotional video for one, which boasts vineyards and at least one golf course. The developer calls southeastern Arizona the best kept secret in the country. Yeah, they're doomed. They're gonna. Oh, nobody's learning their lessons. That's fairly obscene, but buy a house in the middle of the desert, wonder why you run out of water when nobody's taking good care of it. Anyway, where did I leave off in the side chat? Trading Whoopi Goldberg for South Africa. That was a good deal. I like that. Rick Dees. All right, we saw that. Oh, this is the Antifa guy locked and loaded, breaking into businesses. He was arrested for multiple burglaries. Then they found the explosives. He was also a convicted felon prior to, too, huh? Wow. He was a 3-time loser then. Yeah, Galenas, if we can get your recommendation to the State Department, maybe we can make that happen. Man, we're hitting all kinds of subjects in here today. So Walter Davis following up on the salt mines in the Great Lakes. There's only a few hundred yards of dirt between the lake and the mines. The mine's 1,000 feet deep. A low-level earthquake and it's over. That's all it takes to break that through, you think? Or the lake would start infiltrating in. Locked and loaded, and JJ talking about felons' rights to own a firearm. I think JJ has got it right. He should have been hung like in the old days. Yeah, we don't put people out of our misery soon enough when they are a violent or a danger to society, and we put them on this supposed probation and stuff like that. There's no sense of them moving about society. That's one of our downfalls. Punishment for Walter Davis has a recommendation. Punishment for stealing water should be exiled to a dried out place in Africa. Yeah, Walter, nobody's going after Nestle for using all the water they can, right? Yep. That's been several issues up in Michigan, as JJ brings up here further down. There's been several articles more recently about that. You had basically that whole town up in arms and nobody was able to stop it, were they? Hey, Tommy boy, thanks for joining us. I don't think I'd said hello to you. What's going on? You sneaking in here? Morning. Your electric was out. You got that big storm rolling through. We were looking at the weather. There was that big swath of water that was off the Carolina coast that come through your area. So that was a really long article to get to the end of that, but people just making unsustainable decisions. And, when it comes to the state has a certain, when you form a state to do certain jobs, you'd think, we talk about beneficial use and common resources. you'd think that would be one of them, and they fell at this job, but then they approve a 20,000 house tract of land for use, and do you wonder what's going to happen to the water in that area when that happens? Mismanagement at a lot of levels, and then unsustainable development with those tree farms and stuff like that, like foolish mistakes. So that's going to wrap up, I think, for today, folks. We're going to move out here and try to get this part of the house painted before it gets too hot. Continue to work on that project and see what else we can get done around here. You all have a good weekend. Thanks for checking in. We will talk at you later. Live free.